Most families move through their holidays wrapped in excitement, routine, cooking, getting ready, all that familiarity. In Woodland Park, Colorado, the family of Kelsey Berreth, on that Thanksgiving Day, was waiting for a phone call that never came. And somewhere else in the country, one woman, a nurse, a mother, a self-proclaimed Christian, was driving alone through the mountains with the knowledge of what lay inside Kelsey's condo. Blood on the walls, blood on the floor, blood on her daughter's toys. And she knew exactly who put it there. More importantly, she knew exactly what she was going to do about it. Nothing. And everything. Everything wrong. This episode isn't a deep dive into the murder of Kelsey Berreth. It's about the woman who stepped into that nightmare willingly, not under hypnosis, not at gunpoint, not chained up or threatened, willingly. A woman who drove from Idaho to Colorado alone, past police stations, sheriff's offices, gas stations, strangers, and countless chances to reporting murder, and never once tried. A woman who cleaned up a bloodbath for the man that she wanted to keep. A woman who carried evidence across state lines, lied to investigators, and helped a killer cover his tracks. You'll hear excuses, you'll hear the legal jargon, pressure, fear, control, but here's the truth. She had options. She had agency. She had a working vehicle, working cell service, and a moral compass that she chose to ignore. I have zero sympathy for this bitch. Not a shred. If there were any justice at all, she'd still be in a prison cell, and she'd stay there for the rest of her miserable life. This is the story of a woman who could have stopped everything, but instead became the accomplice who carried a killer's violence into every room she walked into. Kelsey Berreth trusted the wrong people, and one of them made a choice that no plea deal and no courtroom apology could ever justify. Welcome back to Dark Dialogue Distilled. This is the space where I step away from the full investigations and talk directly to you, the listeners. One case, one angle, and the things that just won't leave me alone. Sometimes that's a case that we've already covered. Sometimes it's one that we haven't even touched yet. And sometimes it's a story where something just doesn't sit right and I need to say it out loud. That's what this episode is. We haven't covered the Kelsey Berreth case on the main Dark Dialogue show yet. Not the full breakdown, not the multi-episode treatment. But this episode isn't that. This is me focusing on one aspect of this case that has always bothered me. The choices people made, the silence that followed, and the line between fear and complicity. If you're here, I truly appreciate it. Your time, your attention, and your willingness to engage with these conversations are what make Distilled possible. If you haven't already, follow the show, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future episodes. Leave a rating or a review. That helps more than you might think. And if this episode sticks with you, share it. Bring more people into the conversation. All right, let's get into it. So before this case became a courtroom spectacle, before the plea deals, the prison sentences, and the headlines, there was just Kelsey Berreth. Kelsey was 29 years old. She was a licensed pilot and flight instructor, a profession that she loved and worked hard to build. She lived in Woodland Park, Colorado, a quiet mountain town outside Colorado Springs, where she was raising her 1-year-old daughter. Friends and family describe her as intelligent, driven, and deeply devoted to her child. Kelsey shared that child with her fiancé, Patrick Frazee, a rancher from nearby Florissant, Colorado. Although the two were engaged, they did not live together. Kelsey and her daughter lived full-time in Woodland Park, while Frazee remained on his family's ranch. By multiple accounts, the relationship was strained in the months leading up to Kelsey's death. On Thanksgiving Day, November 22nd, 2018, Kelsey was seen on surveillance video shopping at a Safeway grocery store for supplies to make her Thanksgiving dinner. Later that day, she dropped the child off with Frazee. That is the last time that Kelsey was publicly seen alive. Days passed with no contact. When Kelsey's mother was unable to reach her for more than a week, she reported her daughter missing on December 2nd. Investigators went to Kelsey's condo and found her purse, keys, and personal belongings still inside. There were no signs that she had packed up or left voluntarily. What police would later discover was far more disturbing. Inside the condo, investigators identified blood evidence that had been smeared and partially cleaned. indicating a violent assault had occurred. Bleach and cleaning agents had been used, but not effectively enough to eliminate all traces. It was clear that this was not an accident and not a disappearance by choice. At the same time, Kelsey's cell phone appeared to tell a different story. Text messages were sent from her phone to Patrick Frazee, to her employer, and to her mother. Location data showed the phone traveling from Colorado into Idaho. Initially, this created the illusion that Kelsey might have left on her own. That illusion would eventually collapse. As the investigation deepened, prosecutors uncovered evidence that Patrick Frazee had been planning Kelsey's murder for months. Trial testimony revealed that Frazee had solicited an on-again, off-again girlfriend, Idaho nurse Krystal Lee Kenney, multiple times in 2018, asking her to kill Kelsey. The proposed methods included poisoning her coffee and attacking her with blunt objects. Kenney told the court that she refused to carry out those plans. On the day of the murder, however, Frazee acted alone. According to Kenney's testimony, Frazee went to Kelsey's condo and convinced her to play a, quote, can't-sendle guessing game. He blindfolded her using a sweater, then attacked her from behind, beating her to death with a baseball bat. Their toddler was in another room of the condo at the time. After the killing, Frazee placed Kelsey's body inside a black plastic tote. He later transported it to his ranch where he burned the tote, her remains, and other evidence in a fire. No recoverable remains of Kelsey Berreth have ever been found. 2 days after the murder, Frazee called Krystal Kenney and instructed her to drive from Idaho to Colorado. Kenney later admitted that she entered Kelsey's condo and helped clean up extensive blood evidence using bleach and other chemicals. She also admitted to taking Kelsey's cell phone back to Idaho, using it to send misleading text messages to family and coworkers before discarding it. Kenney eventually cooperated with investigators. She led law enforcement to the burn site and provided detailed testimony about Frazee's planning, the murder, and the cleanup. Prosecutors described her cooperation as critical for solving the case. Patrick Frazee was arrested in December of 2018 and charged with first-degree murder, solicitation to commit murder, and tampering with a deceased human body. In November 2019, a Teller County jury found him guilty on all counts. Evidence included Kenney's testimony, cell phone data, surveillance footage, and recorded jailhouse conversations in which Frazee attempted to arrange the murder of additional witnesses. Frazee was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 156 years. His conviction and sentence were later upheld on appeal. Krystal Kenney pleaded guilty to tampering with physical evidence. After appellate rulings on her sentence, she ultimately served 18 months in prison and was released under supervision. This is the foundation of the case, the facts that are not in dispute. What comes next is where the questions begin. Before her name was splashed across headlines, before prosecutors described her as a willing accomplice, before she stood in a courtroom pretending to tremble under the weight of her own damn choices, Krystal Lee Kenney was the last person anyone would have expected to be connected to the murder of a young mother. And that is what makes the truth so damn disturbing. Krystal wasn't some drifter. She wasn't isolated, cornered, or desperate. She wasn't trapped in a violent relationship with nowhere to turn. She lived in Idaho, surrounded by community, friends, family, and a support system most people only dream of. She had options, and she rejected every single one. She grew up in the small agricultural town of Hanson, Idaho, rodeo country, close-knit enough that everybody knows everybody and reputations are built over decades. And hers? Well, her reputation was spotless. She was a horsewoman, the cowgirl, the former Magic Valley rodeo queen, crowned in 2008. People remembered her smiling on horseback, a picture-perfect hometown success story. She was a registered nurse, a profession built on trust, compassion, and protecting vulnerable lives. She worked at a hospital in Twin Falls and was known for being reliable, dependable, the kind of person people wouldn't hesitate to leave their children with. A mother herself, 2 kids who relied on her. To everyone around her, Krystal was stable, grounded, normal. And it's that normality, that clean, respectable facade that makes what she did so damn chilling. Because when someone like this chooses to participate in something evil, It forces you to confront an unsettling truth. Monsters aren't always born in the dark. Sometimes they come from sunny ranch towns, wear nurses' scrubs, and smile in family photos. Krystal met Patrick Frazee back in 2006. Their relationship was toxic from the start, not abusive in the way that excuses anything, but manipulative, messy, and built on poor choices that she walked into with both eyes open. She became pregnant during their affair and had an abortion because Frazee insisted on it, a decision that tied her to him in a heavy, private way. He pushed her to divorce her husband. She did. But even after the divorce, the affair fizzled until it reignited in 2017. Friends described her as giddy whenever Frazee resurfaced in her life. This wasn't fear. This wasn't control. This was wanting a man who treated her like a disposable backup plan. When she discovered that he was involved with Kelsey Berreth and had a child, the shock didn't push her away. It pulled her deeper because now she believes she had competition. And that is when Frazee began feeding her stories, lies about Kelsey being an abusive mother, claims the baby wasn't safe. He fabricated crises designed to make Krystal feel like the only one who could help. For someone with her training, her experience, and her resources, she should have been the first person to report these lies. Instead, she became the one Frazee tested, the one he instructed, the one he asked to murder a woman that she'd never even met. And she didn't run. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't warn Kelsey. She didn't contact police. She stayed, and later, she would help him finish what he'd started. Krystal Lee Kenney wasn't a victim of circumstance. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't cornered. She was a respected nurse, a rodeo queen, a mother, a woman with every opportunity to do the right thing, as she chose evil anyway. Patrick Frazee didn't stumble into manipulation. He crafted it. He practiced it. He perfected it. And he used it like a weapon against the people in his orbit, especially women who mistook his cowboy confidence and quiet demeanor for strength instead of danger. But let's get one thing straight before going any further. Understanding Frazee's manipulation does not excuse, justify, or soften what Krystal Lee Kenney chose to do. He may have paved the road, but she got in the car. She hit the gas and drove it across state lines all by herself. This segment is about Frazee's tactics, not her absolution. Frazee built an image that rural communities know all too well. The stoic rancher who speaks little, works hard, and keeps emotions locked behind a fence line. A man who handles things. A man who doesn't complain. A man whose silence looks like strength. To a lot of people, that's attractive. To someone like Krystal Lee, who spent years romanticizing him, even calling him her, quote, first love, that person was magnetic. Frazee used that. He weaponized it. He presented himself as the kind of man who knew better, saw deeper, stood firmer, someone you don't question, you follow. Frazee understood something crucial. You don't manipulate people by treating them badly all the time. You manipulate them by treating them well sometimes. He kept Krystal in a constant cycle of unexpected affection, sudden distance, emotional breadcrumbs, bursts of attention, long silences, selective honesty. Every reconnection hit her like a drug. That giddy feeling that was described, that's intermittent reinforcement, the backbone of psychological conditioning. But again, let's be clear, manipulation explains vulnerability. It does not erase responsibility. Krystal wasn't isolated. She wasn't locked away. She had 2 children, a career, and a full support network. She had the ability to say no at any time, but she never did. This is where Frazee's strategy turned darker. He didn't just say that he hated Kelsey. He didn't just say that he wanted out of the relationship. He constructed a narrative. Kelsey was abusive. The baby was in danger. He was fighting for custody. He needed help because he was desperate. Every word was a lie, but they were lies designed to prey on Krystal's worst instincts, her jealousy, her need to matter, her need to be chosen, her need to be the hero in Frazee's story. Frazee wasn't asking her to kill a rival. He was asking her to save a child. And she bought it, fully, repeatedly, Not because she had no choice, but because she wanted the fantasy that he dangled in front of her. When emotional manipulation wasn't enough, Frazee moved to intimidation. Threats about her daughter, threats framed as offhand comments like, quote, "Little girls come up missing all the time." That's a line designed to rattle someone to their core, and it did. But again, here's the reality. She still had options. She still had safety. She still had the ability to drive straight to the police the moment that she crossed a state line. Instead, she chose to obey him, even after the murder, even after she saw what he had done, even after she realized every word that he'd fed her was a lie. Manipulation may explain the mechanism, but obedience is still a choice that she made again and again. Some experts compare Frazee's control to puppet strings, the rancher mystique, the emotional push-pull, the guilt, the secrecy, the threats. Fine, but even a puppet can cut the strings if it wants to, and Krystal never did. Not when she was asked to poison Kelsey, not when she was asked to beat Kelsey with a pipe, not when Frazee committed the murder himself, not when she walked into a blood-covered condo, not when she cleaned it, not when she burned the evidence, not when she drove home. Frazee may have built the mechanism, but she operated it willingly, and that is what makes this case so chilling. When you strip away the excuses, the psychology, and the courtroom theatrics, Krystal Lee Kenney's story comes down to one thing. She had chance after chance to stop a murder, and she chose not to. Everything that follows is from her perspective, not because she deserves the spotlight, but because understanding her actions makes her complicity undeniable. Patrick Frazee's first assignment was simple in design and horrifying in intention. He wanted Krystal, a registered nurse, someone trained to heal, to poison Kelsey Berreth's Starbucks caramel macchiato with Ambien and Valium. And she agreed to try. She drove 12 hours from Idaho to Colorado, alone. No one forced her. No one followed her. She wasn't trapped. She knocked on Kelsey's door, pretending to be a friendly neighbor, and handed over the drink, but she never laced it. Frazee was furious. Krystal didn't call the police. She didn't warn Kelsey. She simply went home. Her first failure to kill. Her first failure to protect. Frazee's next idea was a blunt force ambush. He told Krystal to grab a steel pipe outside his property and wait at Kelsey's townhome. He mapped out where she should stand, how she should swing, where to hit. Krystal went, again, alone, with an actual murder weapon in her hands. She stood outside Kelsey's home, listening to barking dogs, waiting for the moment, and then she backed out. She didn't warn Kelsey. Again, she didn't contact police. She simply left. Her second failure to kill. Her second failure to save. Frazee escalated, this time an aluminum baseball bat. Go swing away, he told her. She drove back to Kelsey's home with the bat, sat in her car, waited, and backed out again. 3 attempts, 3 drives across state lines, 3 opportunities to stop a murder before it started, and she chose silence every freaking time. So Frazee finally killed Kelsey himself. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't chaotic, it was a deliberate act that he'd been building toward for months. He blindfolded her with a sweater, told her to smell scented candles, and then beat her to death with a baseball bat as she begged him to stop. Later, he called Krystal. No greeting, no buildup, just a simple sentence. You have a mess to clean up. And she knew immediately. She didn't call the police. She didn't call a friend. She didn't panic. She packed supplies, bleach, gloves, a hairnet, trash bags, and drove back to Colorado alone. Krystal used Kelsey's own house keys to enter the Woodland Park condo. It wasn't a mystery what had happened. The scene was exactly what Frazee left behind. Blood on the walls, blood on the furniture, blood on baby toys, blood on stuffed animals, blood on the floor. This wasn't the act of someone frozen by fear. This wasn't the act of someone completing a task. She scrubbed for hours. She gathered evidence into trash bags. She found a human tooth. She kept cleaning. She said she did it so Kelsey's mother and daughter wouldn't have to see the horror. But she never called them. She never warned them. She never saved them from anything. She protected only one person, Frazee. and herself, of course. Krystal later said she intentionally left small blood spots behind so investigators would find them. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's self-serving. Maybe it's something she told herself to feel better. But here's the reality. Leaving a few flecks of blood does not erase an entire night spent destroying evidence of a murder. It doesn't change the drives that she made. It doesn't change the lies that she told. It doesn't change the phone that she destroyed, the keys she discarded, the gun she took, or the purse she burned. It changes nothing. Frazee confessed to full murder to her, even reenacted it, and then burned everything. Kelsey's body, the tote he transported her in, her daughter's toys, her clothing, her possessions, even her Bible. Krystal stood by and she watched. She never screamed, never ran, never called for help. She helped him finish the job. Krystal Lee didn't swing the bat, but she made sure nobody would ever find the evidence. She didn't kill Kelsey Berreth, but she turned Thanksgiving into a disappearing act, and she turned a murder into a ghost story. She turned a mother into ashes and lies. And she had every opportunity to stop it, every mile, every drive, every moment that she was alone on the road, and she chose not to. There are moments in a murder case that reveals who someone truly is. Not the threats, not the excuses, not the stories they tell themselves later. In the moment that they're standing alone inside the horror and they decide what they're willing to do. And for Krystal Lee Kenney, that moment came when she used Kelsey Berreth's own keys to step inside her condo. She knew what waited behind that door. She walked in anyway. The first thing she saw wasn't the walls, it wasn't the floors, it wasn't even the blood-slicked appliances in the kitchen. It was the baby toys, tiny, colorful pieces of innocence spattered with blood, stuffed animals stained, books smeared, a home that should have smelled like a holiday, now smelling like iron and fear. Frazee didn't just take Kelsey's life. He violated the sanctity of motherhood itself, and Krystal walked straight into the aftermath like someone stepping into a job that they'd been assigned. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she didn't call for help, she just got to work. For over 4 hours, Krystal scrubbed Kelsey's home. She wiped blood from the walls and the baseboards. She scraped it off the baby items. She lifted a pillow and found a human tooth that had been knocked out during the beating. She sorted evidence into 6 heavy garbage bags, blankets, pillows, toys, clothing, all soaked in the final moments of Kelsey's life. This wasn't panic. This wasn't frantic chaos. This was deliberate. The destructive intimacy of cleaning up someone else's murder is something most people cannot even imagine. Krystal didn't have to imagine it. She lived it. She used Kelsey's own cleaning products, her own supplies. She erased the last tangible traces of a woman that she never met until the day she plotted to kill her. And when she was done, she drove to Sonic and ordered a hamburger. That's the kind of detail investigators bring up only when they want jurors to truly understand what kind of person they're dealing with. The calm after the carnage. But the cleanup wasn't the end. Frazee gathered everything. Kelsey's body, her possessions, the tote, the baby toys, the blankets, even her freaking Bible, and dumped them into a metal trough on his ranch. Gasoline, motor oil, matches, flames high enough to light the mountain sky. And Krystal stood there and she watched. She watched her first love burn a woman into ash, watched evidence of a life become smoke, watched the bat that she herself once held disappear in fire. This wasn't fear. It wasn't paralysis. It was complicity. Krystal later claimed she intentionally left a few faint spots of blood behind, a breadcrumb trail, a sign she hoped investigators would find. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't, but here's the truth. No breadcrumbs can erase. You don't get moral credit for leaving behind what you didn't have time to destroy. You don't become a hero for forgetting a corner of blood. You don't wipe away your guilt by claiming a moment of conscience after 4 hours of scrubbing and a night of burning evidence. Coworkers noticed that she came back quiet, withdrawn, muted. She herself admitted that she felt a kind of silence afterwards, a stillness. But quiet isn't remorse, calm isn't innocence, and silence isn't justice. They are simply the sounds a person makes after crossing a line they can never come back from. So, was she coerced or complicit? That is the central question. Frazee threatened her. He manipulated her. He intimidated her. He told her, quote, "Little girls come up missing all the time." And she believed him. But she also drove alone across multiple states, passed police stations by the dozens, brought cleaning supplies, used Kelsey's keys, erased the crime scene, helped burn the body, lied repeatedly to investigators, destroyed evidence, tried to make Kelsey look alive after her death. Fear explains behavior. It doesn't justify it. It doesn't sanitize it. It doesn't make it less monstrous. As Kelsey's mother said in court, quote, "The only thing she didn't do was swing the bat," end quote. And that's the truth. Everything else she did. When the public learned that Krystal Lee Kenney served barely more than a year in prison, outrage wasn't a reaction. It was an instinct. 13 months for driving across multiple states to help cover up a murder, for destroying evidence, for cleaning a blood-soaked crime scene, for watching a woman's body burn. 13 months. And the system let her walk. To understand how that happened, you have to understand the deal Colorado prosecutors made, a deal that they openly and publicly called a deal with the devil. Krystal Lee wasn't charged with accessory to murder. She wasn't charged with conspiracy. She wasn't charged with aiding and abetting. She pleaded guilty to one thing: tampering with physical evidence, a charge with a maximum of 3 years, and even that was later reduced by the appellate court, calling her original sentence improperly aggravated. She served around 13 months. 13! Then walked out of prison and went home to rebuild her life, something Kelsey Berreth never got to do. For the Berreth family, for the public, and frankly, for anyone with any kind of a moral compass, it felt like justice had been traded for convenience, because it was. And here's the part that stings. They didn't have a choice. This was a no-body homicide. No remains, no autopsy, no physical way to prove cause of death, no direct forensic link tying Frazee to the murder scene. The case was a puzzle with missing pieces. Krystal Lee was the only person who knew where every piece fit. The 3 failed murder attempts, the planning, the confession, the cleanup, the body burning, the disposal, the lies that Frazee told to stage Kelsey's disappearance. Without her, the prosecutors had circumstantial scraps. With her, they had a narrative, a roadmap, a witness who could testify to intent, motive, method, and aftermath. Investigators reportedly called her the, quote, bread and butter of their case. It was her testimony that allowed every piece of evidence to stick. Without her, Patrick Frazee might still be walking free. And prosecutors knew it, so they cut the deal. A morally rotten, legally necessary deal. The ethics of the plea deal are a minefield. On one hand, the justice system cannot tolerate accomplices walking away with a slap on the wrist. On the other, the justice system also cannot risk a murderer walking free because the only key witness is the accomplice. The district attorney said it outright, quote, "We made a deal with the devil to catch a worse one," end quote. And the judge didn't mince words either. He said her actions were, quote, "cold, calculated, and cruel." Cold, calculated, cruel. He said that about the state's star witness. That tells you everything. Frazee's attorneys did exactly what you'd expect. They attacked her credibility from every angle. She lied to the FBI at first. She told multiple stories. She got the deal before she told the truth. She only cooperated when she had something to gain. And all of it was true, but it didn't matter because even through her self-serving lies, even through her contradictions, even through her cowardice and selfishness, the piece she provided lined up with the physical evidence. She wasn't believable because she was trustworthy. She was believable because the evidence matched her story. And that's what sank Frazee. Jurors didn't deliberate long. Her testimony, combined with forensic data, cell phone records, burn site analysis, and the timeline, became the spine of the prosecution's case. She provided Kelsey's last words, Frazee's blow-by-blow confession, the location of key evidence, the structure of the murder plan, every detail about the cleanup and the burn. It was enough for the jury to convict Frazee on first-degree murder, murder solicitation, and multiple counts of tampering. Krystal didn't swing the bat, but she helped build the case that put the man who did behind bars for life. And for that, the system rewarded her. Not with forgiveness, not with redemption, with freedom a year later. Her early release stands as one of the most uncomfortable realities of this case, a reminder that sometimes justice demands a price that feels unfair, infuriating, and ethically nauseating. The justice system needed her. The Berreth family needed her testimony, and Kelsey Berreth, the woman whose life was taken, deserved a conviction. But the cost was letting the woman who helped erase her walk free far sooner than anyone believes that she should have. That is the deal with the devil, and it's the part of this case that will never sit right. If you study enough human behavior, you realize something unsettling. Obedience can look a lot like evil when you strip away the excuses. Krystal Lee Kenney's story sits right in that uncomfortable spot. The intersection between coercive control, dependency, trauma bonding, and something psychologists call delegated evil. Understanding these forces don't absolve her. It doesn't make her sympathetic. It doesn't rewrite history, but it does reveal how a seemingly ordinary woman became someone who followed the commands of a killer, even when she had every chance in the world to walk away. Patrick Frazee didn't improvise his manipulation. He followed the classic coercive control playbook: isolate, distort moral logic, create dependency, infuse fear, then rewire the victim's sense of responsibility. He fed Krystal lies about Kelsey Berreth being dangerous. He claimed their child was at risk. He twisted maternal instinct into a weapon and reframed violence as protection. He didn't give orders. He gave missions wrapped in moral justification. And Krystal accepted all of it. This wasn't love. It wasn't confusion. It was psychological conditioning applied slowly enough that she didn't notice the trap tightening around her. But even conditioned people can say no, and she rarely did. Krystal spent more than a decade tangled in Frazee's intermittent cycle of affection and abandonment, intense emotional closeness, sudden withdrawal, selective attention, cold distance, then just enough warmth to pull her back in. That cycle is how trauma bonds are formed, not through violence alone, but through unpredictable reward. It's the same pattern seen in addictive relationships, coercive partnerships, and long-term emotional manipulation. Krystal described Frazee as having, quote, power over her. She called him her first love. She spoke about him with the kind of reverence people reserve for someone who shaped their entire emotional history. But trauma bonding explains attachment. It does not explain loyalty to murder. Trauma bonding is a chain, but she still chose not to break it. The Milgram experiments prove something haunting. Ordinary people will do terrible things when instructed by someone they perceive as an authority figure, especially under fear of consequences. Frazee wasn't a scientist in a lab coat, but he embodied the same psychological profile: perceived authority, perceived legitimacy, perceived necessity. He wasn't just ordering Krystal to clean a crime scene. He was issuing a command framed as a life or death directive. And when he told her to come to Colorado, she obeyed immediately, with cleaning supplies, gloves, and a plan of action. Not because she wanted to kill Kelsey, not because she wanted to protect Frazee, but because she had entered what Milgram called the eugenic state. The belief that she wasn't acting on her own moral authority anymore. But here's the difference between Milgram's test subjects and Krystal. Milgram's participants were in a controlled study. Krystal was in a car, alone, with every opportunity to choose differently. She wasn't a subject, she was a participant. And that is the damning distinction. Frazee didn't ask Krystal to help clean the crime scene because he trusted her. He did it to bind her. Delegated evil is one of the most chilling concepts in criminal psychology. The act of forcing another person to commit or conceal harm so deeply that they become inseparable from the crime. It's the ultimate leash. Frazee made sure she was so involved that she could never go to the police without implicating herself. He didn't need her loyalty anymore. He had her silence. That's why he made her scrub the blood, bag the evidence, destroy the phone, burn the remains, witness the flames. Delegated evil is designed to turn a bystander into an accomplice, and an accomplice into a hostage. And it worked. But delegated evil only binds you if you choose to let it, like Krystal did. Psychology can map out pressure. It can explain influence. It can illustrate how fear restructures the human mind, but it cannot turn obedience into innocence. Krystal's story is a case study in how coercion and dependency can corrode judgment, but her actions were still choices. She chose to drive alone to Colorado. She cleaned the crime scene. She helped burn the body. She destroyed the evidence. She lied to the federal agents. She stayed silent until she got a deal. This wasn't a moment of panic. It was a pattern of obedience, a dark, destructive obedience, but obedience nonetheless. The psychology of this case doesn't blur the line between coercion and complicity. It reveals the terrifying truth that sometimes they can coexist. Patrick Frazee will never walk out of a prison yard again. The man who beat the mother of his child to death with a baseball bat, burned her body, and tried to turn a murder into a missing person illusion is serving the harshest punishment the state of Colorado can give, and he earned every second of it. Frazee's trial ended in November of 2019. It didn't take the jury days. It didn't take hours of agonizing debate. They were out for less than 4 hours before returning with a clean sweep: first-degree murder after deliberation, felony murder, 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder, tampering with the deceased human body. The verdict wasn't just unanimous, it was decisive. Judge Scott Sales gave him the maximum sentence possible: life without parole plus 156 additional years. 3 consecutive 48-year terms for the solicitation plots and 12 years for tampering. In court, the judge didn't use softened language. He didn't speak in metaphors. He said Frazee's acts were, quote, vicious, senseless, and without reason nor explanation. And he stated plainly that Frazee burned Kelsey's body like a piece of trash. That line has stayed with the public ever since because it sums up who Frazee truly is. Even behind bars, Frazee didn't stop trying to hurt people. A fellow inmate testified that Frazee passed him handwritten lists and instructions, murder plans, attempts to eliminate key witnesses from his trial, including Krystal Lee herself. The man couldn't stop controlling people. He couldn't stop issuing commands, couldn't stop trying to silence anyone who could hold him accountable. Prison didn't break that pattern. It only showed how deeply it ran. Frazee tried to overturn his conviction, claiming that a caseworker should have Mirandized him. His statements were improperly collected, and the process was flawed. The Colorado Supreme Court was not impressed. They upheld every part of the conviction. Frazee has continued to send letters proclaiming, "I did not kill Kelsey," a hollow cry from a man whose lies burned away with the evidence that he tried to destroy. Every appellate attempt has failed. Every door is closed, and it will stay that way. Frazee is currently incarcerated at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility in Ordway, Colorado, a medium security state prison, not glamorous, not forgiving, not designed for redemption. It is where he will remain until the day he dies. No parole, no second chance, no freedom. A fitting end for a piece of shit that took a young mother's life, tried to erase her existence, and showed no remorse at all for any of it. If Patrick Frazee represents calculated brutality, Krystal Lee Kenney represents something more complicated and in many ways more infuriating. She did not swing the bat, but she helped erase the crime. She did not plan the murder, but she carried out the cleanup. She did not burn Kelsey Berreth's body, but she stood by while it turned to ash. And in the end, she served barely a year in prison. This is the part of the case that still makes people's blood boil. And here's how it happened. Krystal Lee Kenney pleaded guilty to one charge: felony tampering with physical evidence, a Class 6 felony, not accessory to murder, not conspiracy, not aiding and abetting. The deal required full cooperation, testifying against Frazee, admitting that she knew Kelsey was dead, explaining how she moved Kelsey's cell phone, walking investigators through the failed murder attempts, mapping out the cleanup and the burn, identifying the traces of blood that she said she left behind. Prosecutors openly admitted that this was a deal with the devil. They hated it, but they needed it. In a no-body case, her testimony was the spine of the entire prosecution, and they knew it. In January 2020, Judge Scott Sells gave her the maximum sentence allowed, 3 years in prison, 1 year of mandatory parole. He cited aggravating factors such as multi-day evidence destruction, travel across hundreds of miles, repeated lies to investigators, and total cooperation with the killer's cover-up. He looked her in the eye and he told her that she was, quote, cold, calculating, and cruel. And he was right. Kelsey's mother told her, quote, you were an active participant in the murder. That statement will follow Krystal for the rest of her life. But then came February of 2021. A Colorado appeals court vacated the sentence, vacated it. Not because she wasn't guilty, not because she didn't deserve more time, but because the judge hadn't formally documented the aggravating factors that justified exceeding the presumptive maximum. For a Class 6 felony, the default maximum is 18 months, not 3 years. So the court cut her sentence nearly in half. When she was resentenced, Krystal already had enough time served. She walked out on March 23, 2021, about 13 months behind bars, free on parole, home to her children. Meanwhile, Kelsey Berreth's family still had no body to bury. This contrast, leniency for the accomplice, grief without closure for the victims' families, is the heart of the controversy. Frazee hasn't forgiven her for cooperating. From jail, he passed handwritten notes instructing another inmate to kill 3 people involved in the case, and Krystal's name was on the list. For all her freedom, she will never truly be safe, not from the man that she protected, and not from the public judgment that she earned. For many, Krystal's release represents a moral failure. For investigators, it represents a necessary evil, because without her, there is no timeline, no confession, no account of the murder, no details of the cleanup, no proof of motive, no link between Frazee's lies and the physical evidence. She was the only person who knew the full story. But being useful doesn't make her righteous. Being necessary doesn't make her innocent. Krystal Lee Kenney walked out of prison long before justice fell whole. Her freedom is the legal price paid for truth and the emotional cost paid by everyone who cared about Kelsey Berreth. There are cases that end with answers, and there are cases that end with reminders. This one will never feel finished, because even though Patrick Frazee is locked away for life, even though a jury delivered justice, and even though investigators stitched together a case from ashes, lies, and the testimony of a woman who should have done more, Kelsey Berreth is still gone. Her family still wakes up every morning without a place to grieve. Her daughter is growing up without her mother, and her remains will never come home. This case doesn't close with a body being laid to rest. It closes with a fire, a trough full of gasoline and motor oil, and a silence that was supposed to last forever. Frazee believed that he could make a young mother disappear, erase her, burn away every trace of her life and replace it with a story, a lie, a ghost. But evil always leaves fingerprints, even when you scrub, even when you burn, even when your accomplice spends hours trying to make the truth vanish. And here's the part that will always stay with me. Kelsey didn't vanish because she was reckless. She didn't vanish because she trusted the wrong stranger. She vanished because she trusted the father of her child, a man that she should have been able to rely on, a man she was building a life with, a man who used that trust as the perfect cover for murder. And Krystal Lee Kenney, her choices leave another kind of scar. 3 times she had the chance to stop this. 3 times she drove alone across state lines with no one following her and no one controlling her. 3 times she could have gone to police, knocked on a door, made a call, told the truth. And then came the cleanup. 4 hours of scrubbing, begging, disinfecting, and destroying the evidence of a woman that she had never even met until the day she intended to kill her. a mother cleaning up the murder of another mother. There's no psychological model that makes that palatable, no trauma bond that makes it justified, no fear that erases the fact that she chose obedience over morality every single time it mattered. And while her testimony ultimately brought Frazee down, why she pointed out the blood she left behind, and while prosecutors say they needed her, none of that rewrites her role. She walked free long before justice felt complete. And maybe that's the part of the story that will always feel unfinished, that sometimes the justice system has to make bargains that don't make sense to the rest of us. Bargains that trade moral clarity for courtroom certainty. Bargains that secure convictions but leave wounds that never fully close. Patrick Frazee will die behind bars. That's where he belongs. A life sentence plus 156 years, a punishment as heavy as the crime itself. But Kelsey deserved more than a conviction. She deserved a life, a future, holidays with her daughter, a home filled with warmth instead of violence, a Thanksgiving that didn't end in betrayal. So as we wrap this episode, in a time of year where many of you will be sitting around tables with people that you love, I hope you take a moment to hold them just a little bit tighter, because trust, real trust, is something fragile and precious and too often taken for granted. And I want to say this directly from me to you. I'm grateful that you're here, grateful that you listen, grateful that you care about the victims whose stories deserve to be remembered, not buried, not sanitized, and not erased. There are some names that the world learns because of tragedy. But before Kelsey Berreth became a headline, a timeline, or a case file, she was someone who lived a life full of small, beautiful moments, the kind that rarely make the news but mean everything to the people who love you. It's important that we talk about that Kelsey, not the way she died, but the way she lived. Kelsey grew up in Washington State, surrounded by the kind of landscapes that make you believe in possibility. Tall evergreens, cool air, and room to dream. She was a bright child with an easy smile, the kind of girl who grew into the kind of woman that you're proud to know. Not just because she was kind or responsible or steady, though she was all of those things, but because she lived with intention. She worked hard, she earned her path, and she followed her passions with everything that she had. Aviation became one of those passions. There's something poetic about that. A young woman who loved the sky, who found freedom in the places most people only look at from below. Flight school isn't easy. It's rigorous, disciplined, unforgiving. But Kelsey didn't just pass, she excelled. She became a flight instructor, guiding others into the same skies that she loved. She didn't live loudly, she lived responsibly. And there's a quiet courage in that kind of life. Her family describes her as gentle and thoughtful, someone who noticed things, someone who listened. She was the type of person who remembered birthdays, who checked in, who showed up. And when she held her baby daughter for the first time, motherhood became not just a role, but her purpose. Friends said she glowed around her child. Her family said she blossomed, and every photo of the two of them together confirms the same truth. Kelsey loved being a mom. It radiated from her. She built a life in Woodland Park, a town with mountains for neighbors and enough quiet to raise a child in peace. She worked, she cared, she laughed, she planned. She wasn't chasing drama or chaos. She was building stability and safety for herself and for her daughter. She deserved to grow old in that life. She deserved first days of school, holiday mornings, and birthday candles. She deserved to see her daughter take her first steps, lose her first tooth, fall in love for the first time, graduate and grow into the woman that she would have raised her to be. Kelsey was a woman who did everything right. She worked hard, she cared deeply, she trusted carefully, and she moved through life with quiet resilience. The kind most people never notice, but the kind that holds families together. Her loss is a wound that cannot fully heal, not because of the violence itself, but because of what was stolen. The future she should have lived, the mother her daughter deserved to have, the years her family should have shared. And yet, despite the cruelty of her final moments, Kelsey Berreth's legacy is not defined by what was done to her. It is defined by who she was: a loving mother, a devoted daughter, a dedicated pilot, a woman of kindness and quiet strength, someone who made the world softer simply by being in it. Her daughter will grow up learning about the mother who loved her more than anything, not through tragedy, but through stories. Stories of her laugh, her gentleness, her determination, her grace. Stories of how deeply she cared for the people that she loved. And every time we speak her name with respect, every time we tell her story truthfully and tenderly, we help keep that legacy alive. Kelsey Berreth deserved a life full of years that she never got to live, but she also deserves to be remembered for the beauty that she brought into this world, not the horror that she endured leaving it. So tonight, we remember her, we honor her, we speak her name with care, and we hold space for the woman she was and for the life that should have been hers. For Kelsey, for her daughter, for every person who loved her, may her memory outshine the darkness, and may her story never be forgotten. Thank you for joining me for this Dark Dialogue Distilled episode on the Kelsey Berreth case, a case defined by manipulation, betrayal, and the brutal cost of silence. If today's episode resonated with you or offered perspective that you haven't heard before, please take a moment to support the work that goes into telling these stories. Make sure you follow the show, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leaving a rating or a review helps more than you can possibly imagine. It pushes the show forward, and it helps new listeners find us and keeps these stories in circulation. And I want to say this plainly from me to you. I appreciate you. Every download, every message, every moment that you choose to spend with me in these stories matters. You're the reason that this show exists, and I don't take that lightly. If you want to explore cases in greater depth, you could support the work on Patreon, on Ko-fi, or through Substack, where I share extended case files, behind-the-scenes research, and bonus content that doesn't make it into these episodes. You can always reach out at info@darkdialogue.com with case suggestions, thoughts, or simply to say hello. We will return to Kelsey's case on the main Dark Dialogue show in a full, multi-episode format, examining every angle, every detail, and every unresolved question the way that it deserves. Until then, I hope today's focused perspective gave you something meaningful to think about. Thank you for spending part of your day with me. Thank you for caring about these stories, and thank you for helping keep the memory of victims like Kelsey alive. This has been Dark Dialogue Distilled. Stay curious, stay relentless, and don't let the truth go silent.